Hey, David, I think that this new attack in Lebanon is a good example of life imitating art. As you remember, we did a video with Mr. Robot where Elliot was able to blow up a building, the data center, by attacking the UPSs. So we have something similar took place in Lebanon in the last few days. What they did is they built these pagers and they put in for one of the batteries, or right next to the lithium battery, they put in a small charge of C4. One of the things, this is one of the theories, is that Mossad or whoever has figured out a way to trigger the explosion of these batteries. And that would be much more nefarious because it would mean that all of our devices that have lithium batteries in them could be used as weapons.
I think a massive worry that I just thought about is which devices do we have these days that have huge battery packs, right? And they get moving, they move around. Electric cars. Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
if they could get access to that, I mean, can you imagine what they could do there? Big thank you to CrowdSec for sponsoring this video. CrowdSec is an open source, community-driven security tool designed to protect your servers, websites, and web applications. CrowdSec operates by analyzing user behavior and logs on a network or system to detect and block potential threats. It's as easy to get started as going to app.crowdsec.net and signing up for the CrowdSec console. You can install the CrowdSec security engine to inspect attacks. This is as simple as running a few commands depending on your operating system and your server. You also need to install a remediation engine to act upon the decisions made by the security engine. To add your security engine to the CrowdSec console, you need to run the following command under Enroll your CrowdSec security engine. After your enrollment, you'll need to restart CrowdSec on your server to confirm that your security engine is properly connected to your console. Scenarios show you all the attacks and vulnerabilities that CrowdSec protects you against. The alerts on the CrowdSec console shows you all the IP addresses that are attacking your online services and also through which attack vector they're attacking you. Finally, you can subscribe to block lists for your security engine. You can click on block lists to subscribe to them as your service requires. CrowdSec gives you curated threat intelligence powered by the crowd. With their tools and community-driven insights, you'll enhance your security, ensuring that you can focus on your core activities with peace of mind. Use the link below to get started. Hey everyone, it's David Bommel back with the amazing OTW. OTW, great to have you back on the channel.
Thank you, David. It's always an honor to be on the best IT and cybersecurity channel on YouTube.
Thanks, man, for saying that. And I have had a lot of people asking me about this specific topic. Something's been happening in the Middle East again. We've heard about pages blowing up and walkie-talkies blowing up. And a lot of people have pinged me on YouTube saying, can you talk about it? Can you get OTW to talk about it? But just for everyone who's watching, just before we talk about that, OTW is the author of this book, Linux Basics for Hackers. We have done a whole series on this book, so I'll link that below. OTW has also written this book, Network Basics for Hackers, as well as Getting Started Becoming a Master Hacker. OTW, you are the guy I like to talk to about like real-world hacks and Mr. Robot hacks. So perhaps, I'm leading you on here, but perhaps you can tell us about what's been going on. Tell us about some of the stuff we've perhaps discussed with Mr. Robot and what's actually happening in the real world.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to talk about it because it's, I think we've entered we've crossed a new threshold in cyber warfare here in the last week. This is an important subject. And so just to kind of recount for those people who haven't been paying attention is that this week, I think it was on Monday, right? Was it Monday? Monday of this week, the pagers that Hezbollah carries in Lebanon exploded. Like 2,800 of them exploded and caused several deaths, loss of limbs, lots of injuries. And then the very next day, the walkie-talkies exploded. And some solar panels exploded, some TV sets exploded, some laptops exploded. And so this is very curious because we've never seen anything quite like this before. And so you may remember, viewers, that a while ago, David and I did a video, and hopefully, David, you can leave a link to it at the bottom here. We did a video maybe a year or two ago on Mr. Robot blowing up buildings.
Yep.
Right? So very similar. Right? So what happened in that particular episode of Mr. Robot is that he blew up an entire building by basically hacking the firmware of the UPSs. Right? So UPS's uninterruptible power supply, the batteries that these big data centers use. So every big data center draws a lot of energy, and they certainly can't go down. So what they do is they have these big battery banks. These battery banks are like room sized. They're like not stadium size. They're like basketball court in some case size rooms with batteries in them to be able to power these data centers if the power goes out. So in that particular episode of Mr. Robot, what he did is he hacked the firmware and raised the voltage on the batteries. The batteries, when the voltage rises, then they begin to leak hydrogen gas, and then all it takes is some spark to set off the explosion. So when I saw this event take place this week, I thought of that particular episode, and that's a very real possibility, right? I don't know that's ever happened in real life, but it certainly is a real possibility, especially since the UPSs being part of the IoT of the world, right, are relatively easy to hack, right? Those devices, they're connected to the internet, right?
Yeah.
And so if they're connected to the internet, that means they've got a little web server on them, right? And those web servers can be hacked. And then once you hack the web server, you can then take control of the UPS and then upload malware, what have you, to that particular device. But this week, right, we had those pagers explode, and then we had the other devices explode as well. So let's talk a little bit about that. The first question is, what is a pager?
Only old people like us know, right?
Right. It's like, who uses pagers and why, right?
Yeah.
So pagers have been around for a long, long time, and they've largely been superseded by cell phones in recent years. Mostly they've been, I think, actually at this point in time, I think like 10% of the pagers in the world are used by NHS in Britain, in there by doctors and medical personnel. So they've largely been obsoleted in most applications. But that's part of the reason why Hezbollah was using it. Okay, is that cell phones are too easily hacked. Right, and cell services are too easily hacked. Now, you got to remember that this is war between the Palestinians and Israel is very, very adept at cell phone hacking. They may be the best at cell phone hacking. Like, remember that NSO Group, the company who developed Pegasus, right, is an Israeli company, and NSO Group sells that Pegasus to basically any government who's willing to pay $20,000 per phone. All right. So they've sold it to governments all over the world. And you can rest assured that they've also sold it to the Israeli government. Right. So that means that cell phones are really not safe for Israel's adversaries, whoever they may be. Right. So the Unit 8200, I don't know if your viewers may be familiar with this. The Unit 8200 is a hacker group. They're a cyber attack group, cybersecurity, cyber attack group in Israel. And they're very, very adept. They're one of the best in the world. Right? And they have very close ties to NSO Group as well. Right? So this is part of why Hezbollah and anybody else who's opposing Israel is very careful about not using cell phones for secure communication. So Hezbollah decided to use pagers, the older technology, which is not being used very much. There's very few of them around. You don't see people use them. They used to be very popular 20 or 30 years ago, but not anymore. But these pagers blew up all at the same time. I think it was 3:30 local time in Lebanon. And so there's at least two theories of what happened here.
OTW, just before you continue with this, I believe one of the advantages of a pager, right, is that it doesn't transmit, it only receives, whereas a cell phone obviously transmits and receives. So it's much easier to track someone on a cell phone than it is on a pager. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, there's a couple of reasons. That one, yeah, the pager is not a transmitting device. It's simply a receiving device. And also keep in mind that a cell phone is really easy to track the location. So even if you didn't hack the individual phone, you can easily track the individual. So if your adversary were using cell phones, like in some cases, I've done some work with U.S. Homeland Security along the border of the U.S. and Mexico, and they use the cell phones of the cartels to track the cartel members. Right, so that's pretty easy to do. That's pretty old school. That's not state of the art by any means, because every time you connect to a cell tower, then it gives away your location. Right? That's where you're at, except if you're in very, very rural areas. And that's part of the problem that Homeland Security has along the Texas-Mexico borders, is some of that area out there is very, very wide open. And so the accuracy of the cell tower signal can be as much as a half a mile, a kilometer, and a kilometer radius. That's a pretty big area.
Yeah.
If you're in an urban area, they can get you down to a few feet. You can locate somebody down to by triangulating the cell tower signals. You can get people down to about 50 feet. It's very, very accurate. So Hezbollah or anybody else who's is working in cyber war has to be careful about using cell phones. In the Ukraine-Russia war, those cell phones have been used to target. So one of the things, it was an interesting story a year ago or so, where the Ukrainians were actually on dating sites. Right? They were on dating sites and they were conversing with Russian soldiers, and they were basically, the word that in English people use is catfishing. They put on a profile that's very attractive, and I love you. You're the greatest thing that God ever made, and I really want to meet you. And of course, then the Russian soldiers would send pictures back, and of course, those pictures have EXIF data on them. Right? Yeah. So when you take a picture with your phone, it has your location on it. And so then the Ukrainians would use this to target the Russian soldiers by it. So that's why they would not use a cell phone. Right? So pagers aren't going to have that kind of location data on it. They're not as easy to hack. I mean, who's hacking pagers in 2024? Nobody is, because nobody's using them, right? Hezbollah uses these pagers, and one of the common techniques of spycraft, is supply chain interruption. Well, this is very similar to what happened, say, for instance, even in the Stuxnet. In the Stuxnet attack against Iran, is that the U.S. and Israel were able to get into the supply chain of the materials that were going into the centrifuges in Iran. And by getting into them, they basically knew what technology was being used. So they were able to know exactly what technology was going into. So they didn't actually plant anything in there, but they got into the supply chain and knew exactly what was going in. One of the theories, the one that's most experts believe is true, is that Israel got into the supply chain of these pagers. So they basically infiltrated their enemies, and they found out that Hezbollah was ordering these pagers to avoid detection. And they created a company, right, that then sold them the pagers. And you can see here on my screen a diagram. This is just speculation, of course. Nobody knows right now what exactly happened. But what they did is they built these pagers, and they put in, for one of the batteries, or right next to the lithium battery, they put in a small charge of C4. And by the scale of the explosions, we can probably say that it was probably C4 or something very close to it. And so they built these pagers with malware, okay, just a little piece of software that basically they could trigger by a pager alert, a detonator, and then an explosive charge. So all they did is sent out a pager message that then triggered the malware, and the malware triggered the detonator, and then the detonator triggered the explosive charge. Okay, so that's the most widely accepted theory of what happened. There's another theory out there, all right, that probably is more concerning than this, because this is a very targeted attack against an enemy. And it requires that you interrupt, get inside the supply chain, in this case, and plant an explosive inside of the device. But a more nefarious theory is that the lithium batteries within these devices was used as an explosive charge. So they, as you know, lithium batteries can explode. Matter of fact, let me show you a little video. One of the things, this is one of the theories, is that Mossad or whoever has figured out a way to trigger the explosion of these batteries. And that would be much more nefarious, because it would mean that all of our devices that have lithium batteries in them could be used as weapons, right? And that means that none of us are really safe if somebody can actually trigger an explosion of those devices. So one of the negative responses to that theory is that generally the lithium batteries don't explode, but they instead just burn. They start a fire. But in some cases, they do explode. So if somebody was able to determine what the conditions were, to make these batteries explode, then every phone, every laptop, every solar panel could be a weapon. Initially, when it was just the pagers, I think you would have to lean towards the explanation that it was simply a supply chain attack. Now we have all these other devices exploding. So are we to presume that Mossad was able to do supply chain attacks against all these other devices? Maybe, but one of the things that we have to be concerned about is whether or not they've figured out a way to make those lithium batteries explode. And then that becomes much more problematic.
So I saw in that video, OTW, those, I can't remember the exact name, but like the Segway, like scooter thing that you stand on, a lot of those have been banned, right? Because they've been exploding. So there are issues with batteries. And I assume the bigger the battery, the more likely that it's going to be a big explosion, obviously.
Exactly. Yeah, there's those scooters and a number of other devices. If you look on YouTube, you'll find actually a number of fire departments around. For instance, the New York City Fire Department has several videos showing people what can happen to scooters and what have you that they bring into their home. And they have home videos of scooters exploding. And they're just explaining to people, this is a danger. You have to be aware of this possibility. So once again, this is a theory. It's not necessarily been proven by any means. And a lot of people don't think it has credibility because, in general, the batteries don't explode. But as we see, under certain conditions, which maybe Mossad has mastered, that they can be made to explode and give off a lot of energy. But in general, what happens is that what most people have experienced is they start on fire and they burn very, very hot, and you can't put the fire out with water. So if you get a really, really hot fire inside of a pager, right, it could potentially explode.
Yeah, I think it's, I've just looked online while we were talking, like a hoverboard type thing. I know a lot of these have been banned, and it's interesting that the fire departments are showing these things explode. I think, so let me counter some of the stuff I've seen online, OTW. A lot of people are saying the pages couldn't explode because a lot of them just use AAA batteries or AA batteries or whatever. So those batteries are too small to have that amount of explosive capability. And like you said, some of these lithium-ion batteries can just heat up, but they won't explode.
And that's the counter to that theory, is that those batteries are relatively small and they don't have as much energy. And so that's a good argument against it. I'm not saying that that's not possible, though. Right? I'm saying that it's unlikely, but it's not impossible. And certainly, the larger the battery, the more energy, the larger explosion. So I'm not advocating for either one of these theories. Most experts seem to think it's a supply chain issue. But the fact that we're getting other devices exploding in Lebanon kind of argues against that possibility. Right? It argues that it seems unlikely that they could have gotten into the supply chain, say, of the solar panels, right, that are sold in Lebanon, or inside of the laptops. And it stretches credibility when you start seeing these other devices. If it was a single device, then I can see the supply chain argument. But when you start talking about many different types of devices, all in Lebanon, not in other places, right, that are being exploded. And the other question here is, of course, how do you set the trigger on these explosions, right? Yeah. And if they're connected in any way, shape, or form to the Internet of Things, right? If they're connected to the Internet, then I can communicate to them, I can hack them, and I can set off a series of events that possibly could get them to explode. But if it is a battery issue, that is really worrisome. That's really, really worrisome.
I think a massive worry that I just thought about is, which devices do we have these days that have huge battery packs, right? And they get moving, they move around. Electric cars. Yeah, I mean, exactly. if they could get access to that, I mean, can you imagine what they could do there?
Right. If, you could make, it's potentially true. All right. And whenever we say something's potentially true, that it probably is. If it's potentially possible, right, then it's only a short leap from potentially possible to reality. It's potentially that a Tesla or other electric vehicle could be a weapon, all right, of war. Right. So those things have huge batteries in them. Right? Yep. And if and they're connected to the Internet. Right. And so the attacker potentially could gain access to the car. And that's not that hard to conceive, right? Because hacking cars is a well-known technology, a well-known technique. And once you're inside the vehicle, get inside, say, the firmware of the battery system, and then make them overheat. And it's called a thermal runaway, where these lithium batteries will they'll just get really, really hot and then burn and explode. That size of a battery in a vehicle is really, really large, and a lot of energy would be released.
So DW, just so that we don't get told that we're spreading misinformation, I'll just say this. Online now, I'm on the dw.com, which is, I believe, a German website, a newspaper website. They're saying that our iPhones exploding in Lebanon, that's false. They say fact check, should I say, and then solar panels, false, and then laptops exploding, they also say is false. I'm assuming, there's so much, we've discussed offline, there's so much information out there. A lot of this is developing at the time of this recording, that we're not sure exactly what devices are exploding, but we definitely know it's pages and walkie-talkies, right?
Right. That's what we know with a high level of certainty. Yep. I'm seeing some articles from Hindustan Times, the Times of India, that talk about the solar panels, but here's ABC News. That's pretty reliable. Okay. Let's see what ABC News says. In the U.S., this ABC is considered to be an old school media that facts checks. Okay, so here's
that looks very reliable, right? It's like all things. You got to wait until it's confirmed by whatever news source that you trust. But I'm glad that you're showing that, because that says the opposite of what this other article said that I found.
But this is also 2 days old, right? Yep. And so there may be better information right now, but this is Lebanon's national news agency says the solar panels did explode. There may be better information 2 days later than was available at the time of this. But in any case, there's also reports of laptops. Now, whether or not that is real, we don't really know. Okay. So there's a lot of misinformation available on the web. There's lots of great information available on the internet, but you have to take everything with a grain of salt, because there's a lot of people online who want to spread misinformation, all right, and they want to sow division. So you got to always fact check just about everything that you see online.
But I think let's go back to the technical stuff, right? It's
okay.
It sounds at the moment, from what I've seen online, the most plausible explanation is the supply chain,
right?
Where they inserted explosives, used this fake company. I think it was in Hungary, if I remember right. It's a Taiwanese company.
Yes.
Was
right.
supposed
It was
to have
a contractor to a Taiwanese company. They purchased a license to make the pagers.
I mean, the one that I always remember is the one where the NSA was opening up Cisco routers and inserting stuff in the supply chain there and shipping them off. So there was like stuff embedded in the Cisco routers. That's an old one. I mean, the one that you mentioned with the Iran Stuxnet is another example.
Stuxnet. Right.
So this stuff goes on all the time. I think this is just, I think for a lot of people, really scary because so many devices exploded at the same time. And, you know, it wasn't just like one entity. It was like a whole bunch of people that were affected by it. So, yeah, quite scary that. But I understand your pushback on that as well. Is like if there's other devices that are exploding, then it seems like they would have had to get into a lot of supply chains. And if they managed to get into, you know, doing something with batteries, that's really worrying.
If they figured out how to make those batteries explode, then that's very concerning because we have these lithium batteries in all of our devices. Right now, I would say that probably has a really low probability of being accurate. Okay, so let's be clear. It's a low probability that's accurate. But if it is accurate, then that's really concerning. So we'll just have to keep on evaluating as more information comes in. Right now, the consensus seems to be that this is a supply chain attack. So let's be clear on that. The consensus of experts is that this is a supply chain attack. So it isn't going to necessarily affect you and I, unless we're Hezbollah members. But if they figured out how to make the batteries explode, which I think even if they didn't figure out how to make batteries explode, I think that's a really feasible attack vector, in the future.
It's worrying, right? Because our lives, I mean, whenever I talk to you and lots of other experts, it's like scary. You want to go back and live in a cave because so many of us are carrying so many electronic devices. I mean, you're getting hacked. You can get hacked by the internet because all these devices are connected. What I really find worrying is cars, where electric cars, are going to be connected to the internet 24/7. And I interviewed Sam Curry in the past, who managed to hack like all kinds of cars, like Ferraris, BMWs, Mercedes, like almost any brand that you can think of. He managed to hack with these friends. It's really worrying that everything's connected and can be hacked more and more, it seems.
Right. And I think we have to live with the reality in a advanced digital world that everything is hackable. Let's state it very clearly. Everything is hackable. And this potential attack against batteries is very, very worrisome. If that would mean that every one of our devices is a potential weapon. We do know that all of our devices, our cell phones and what have you, are all hackable with Pegasus, for instance.
Yeah.
Right? That's a very real thing. So how big of a leap is it from Pegasus to another piece of malware that manipulates the firmware in the phone to detonate the battery? I don't think it's a big leap. It's one that we should be worried about. But I'm not going to go live in a cave. Maybe you can go live in a cave, but I'm not going to go live in a cave. I kind of like living in my home, but Yeah, maybe if you go live in a cave, you still take your cell phone with you.
What does that help? Yeah.
Yeah, that's not going to help. In any case, I think this is something that's really is interesting. It's something that we need to track and watch. We may have leaped across a new threshold in cyber warfare techniques. But I would say, to kind of sum up, that the consensus among experts is this is a supply chain attack. So let's be clear on that. But if it's a battery attack, right, which I think is very possible, maybe not this one, but in the future, right, that would be really, really scary and much more malicious and endanger everybody to a much greater extent than, say, a targeted supply chain attack like we saw here.
OTW, I really appreciate you sharing. What I love about what you do is you don't just share like really technical stuff. You also do the storytelling piece and explain, what's happening in the world from a hacker's perspective. As always, thanks so much for sharing. And just for everyone who's watching, I've put links to OTW's website below. And OTW, I have to ask you, you're giving a cool discount, right, on your website?
Yes, we offer everybody who's watching these videos a 20% discount on everything. And the coupon is simply David's last name, Bombal, Bombal. Get 20% off books, videos, classes, subscriptions, whatever. Everything. It applies to everything on our website.
OTW, thanks, man.
Thank you, David. Always good being with you.